Hello and welcome. Many of our modern English words descend from our Scandinavian cousins.
Norway!
Yes way. Cozy, comfy, sky, scarf, rain, reindeer, all descend from those rugged muggers who are busy nabbing our cake. But the most relevant Danish deviation to our story today comes from their word for a split piece of wood: ski. This relates to two long planks of wood fastened to one's feet that allows the wearer to glide gracefully across the snow. We know that skiing has a history going back tens of thousands of years, at least the last ice age, and that's really no surprise. As the ice sheets rolled in, our ancient cousins had to develop a method for travelling across these snowy mountains and icy glaciers. Thus, it was only a matter of time before some rather clever chaps or chapettes put two and two together and realised that by distributing their weight over a much larger surface area, they could stay above the snowline, keeping their feet dry. Now, unfortunately, it'd been many years until plastics or rubber would be invented, so space hoppers were out of the question. However, they did have wood, hardwood. That meant that they could fashion this into skis of sorts. We know the first skis came from the Sami people, what's now in the cultural area formerly known as Lapland. We see cave paintings coming from the Zhejiang province in China as well, going back at least 30,000 years. These clearly show hunters following herds of animal across these snowy plains wearing their skis. The first actual skis to be discovered, though, came from the Norwegian-Russian border. It's there that we find skis that are almost 3,000 years old. Still very simplistic in their design, but impressive nonetheless. And these skis weren't just used for moving across the snow more easily, but in an age before waterproof boots, keeping your leather, fat-covered animal skin shoes above the snowline and dry was absolutely vital in preventing frostbite. Around the year 1200 AD, King Sverre Sigurdsson of Norway dispatched troops on patrol using skis. Norwegians even used skiing soldiers to collect the future king Håkon IV as a baby. As they were travelling, they were hit by a storm, but two of the king's most trusted skiers, this guy and this guy, skied through the blizzard, bringing the young king to safety. To this day, this is remembered through the annual Berkenbennet. This. So cold. In honour of these two young soldiers carrying their king to safety, in 1932, the Berkenbennet was introduced, a 54-kilometre race that traverses two mountains and takes its skiers through breathtaking landscapes. To replicate the weight of the young Håkon IV, each skier must carry a backpack weighing at least 3.5 kilograms. It's no surprise that to this day the Norwegians lead in most medals tables when it comes to the Winter Olympics, particularly in the ski jumping and, no surprise, the cross-country skiing. By the late 1800s, nearly every Northern army had a ski division of sorts, but it was still mainly the Norwegians and the Swedes who had the largest and most skilled forces. Eventually, what started as training exercises became competitions, racing down treacherous mountains, only stopping for target shooting before skiing on, repeating the process. Now, up until this point, skis had only really been used in military circles. No one had ever heard of the idea of recreational skiing or doing it for fun, as it were. That wasn't until a man called Olaf Rye came along. Olaf Rye was a major general within the Norwegian army and later gone to become a war hero. However, when he was just a young cadet, he did the equivalent of asking his mates to hold his beer whilst charging down the side of a mountain on his skis, only to launch himself off a ramp flying 9.5 metres through the air. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a good 50 metres off Eddie the Eagle in Calgary in the 1980s. However, when you consider that Olaf had wooden skis that weighed approximately 16 tons more than Eddie's modern ones would have done, that's quite an impressive achievement. Not to mention the fact that he was wearing bear skins rather than lycra. And it's at this point in our story that a Yorkshireman comes in, William Slingsby. No way. Yes way.
Yes,
For my Harrogate viewers, a distant relative of that William Slingsby that founded the spa town. This William Cecil Slingsby, however, was far better known in the land that he called his northern playground than he was back in his native Yorkshire. William Slingsby was known as the father of Norwegian mountaineering. He actually invented the practice of ski mountaineering, something that had never been thought of before, but in actual fact turned out to be ideal for taking on these huge mountains. It meant that once you got to the top, you could just ski down the other side. He was also the first person to introduce Norwegian skis to the Alps. At first, it was just people living in places like Aosta in Switzerland that were using them. In the early 1800s, the only time of year one might reasonably be expected to visit the Alps would be during the summer months. You would enjoy the beautiful lakes and the incredible cuisine. Coming here in winter was unfathomable. However, three big things changed. First of all, we had the railways arrive. That meant that people could travel here even when the snows came down. Then you had people like Queen Victoria come along. Queen Victoria summered in Switzerland just 7 years after Albert died, and it was a sensation. It did wonders for the Swiss Tourism Board, as they'll tell you themselves.
Absolutely, yes. It was the kind of thing that the Swiss tourist industry had been praying for. She was based in a small pension very near Lucerne on a hill, and most of the time made day trips. That included some pretty grueling mountain climbs, which she negotiated on foot or partly on her pony. And she was very proud in her journal at saying that she was up there 8,000 feet high, where she really found bracing air in very, very full measure, and walked on the Rhone glacier. And of course, as always at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, had tea, which was made all over the place and everywhere. In the years afterwards, of course, it was possible to say, here, Queen Victoria came, you must come too, and people did.
I think to this day there are something like 20 hotels that are still named after Queen Victoria from this one visit. However, the really big thing that changed people's minds about skiing was the invention of the ski lift. Today, skiers may take for granted how effortlessly they can ascend by thousands of feet in just a few minutes. In the early days, to gain elevation, one might have to ride a train to a particularly precarious mountain pass or simply hike uphill. That was until the appropriately named Robert Winterhalter, quite literally translating to Robert Winterslope, ploughed onto the scene. Winterhalter's family farm was nestled in the Black Forest highlands of Germany. Not exactly the mountains, but a popular destination for Europeans, especially the English alpinists, many suffering from asthma and other respiratory conditions, who were recommended by their doctors to escape smoggy London and take the fresh air of the spa town, even in winter. Given this skiing thing seemed to be popular with his visitors to the family restaurant and guest house, he looked to develop a method to transporting his guests to the top of the farm. The farm already used a water-powered belt drive to mill, so why not extend it to the bottom of the hill, and instead of grinding grains, use it to haul hitchhikers to the top? Sadly, just a few years after it was introduced, the First World War was about to rear its ugly head. And along with all the tragedies that came with it, Robert Winterslope's, the first ever ski lift in the world, was torn down and melted for scrap. Luckily, an Austrian company bought Winterslope's patent, and as of today, 24,000 ski lifts have been installed worldwide. My personal favourite, coming from the Mount Hood Aerial Transportation Company, where they retrofitted Oregon buses to be used as gondolas, whisking up to 38 passengers at a time up to the top of the hill. To this day, ski lifts are the safest mode of transportation in the world, with about 1 death per billion miles travelled. Soon enough, the English alpinists that had been inspired by Queen Victoria and other stories were travelling in here. Using these skis, they started going up the mountains, and it created a whole tourism sector around this outdoor activity. In 1908, Thomas Cook even started offering skiing packages for the first time. And then in the 1930s, the ski lift was invented. And that meant that you didn't have to climb all the way to the top of the mountain. And it exploded the popularity of skiing as we know it today.
Today there are 35 million skiers around the world in a sport that's been going for less time than, well, lots of things that I can't think of now. Some really cold. But it's been really fun having you along with us for this story today. Thank you to the amazing Rebecca on the camera. A huge thank you to Patty and Rupert, and have a wonderful afternoon.